Thanks so much for joining us here on CBS News Colorado. We are talking CU football. Today, the 2024 schedule came out alongside Romy Bean and Eric Christensen. I'm Michael Spencer. We're going to break this thing down. Let's take a look at the first chunk of games, if you will. The season going to start against North Dakota State on August 31st. Then back-to-back road trips at Nebraska, at Colorado State, and then Baylor, and then at Central Florida. Romy, I'll start with you. What stands out about that first chunk of games as the Buffs enter year 2 under Prime?
Well, we've known the non-conference play for a while, but I think this is great. North Dakota State is not a gimme, one of the perennial powerhouses in the FCS. And then you've got, just like last year, Nebraska, then Colorado State, but this time both of them are on the road. We know the heat with both teams. Those games were so testy. This is the last time they play CSU till 2029. It's in Fort Collins. Haven't played in Fort Collins since '96. We saw it even in the Prime documentary. We know there is tension. This is just going to be leveled up. What a way to kick off the season.
Yeah, that scene at Canvas Stadium is going to be crazy because the Buffs have never played at Canvas Stadium, and it's been a long time since they've played in Fort Collins. So that scene is going to be wild. A couple notes about North Dakota State. They've won 9 of the last 13 FCF national championships, so they are no joke. I think they beat CSU maybe 5-6 years ago up in Fort Collins. And Nebraska, the Buffs are going for their 3rd straight win in Lincoln. Never been done before.
You think,
no
you think the Huskers know about
ever
that?
beaten Nebraska 3 times in Lincoln. Yes, they do, and Nebraska's going to be much better. They did really well in recruiting this year. They did really well in the transfer portal, and it pains me to say this, but I think Matt Rule's a pretty good coach. He did a great job at Baylor. So Nebraska's going to be better.
I like the way this schedule shapes up. It gives Deion Sanders a lot of opportunities to motivate his guys and keep them focused in the offseason, not only through spring ball, but obviously when fall camp begins as well. Let's take a look at the next chunk of the schedule. 2 byes this year, one on October 5th, then Kansas State at Arizona, Cincinnati, and then a bye week as well on November 2nd. I think if you're Deion, you like the fact that you've got 2 byes. Give your guys an opportunity to rest up before you kind of hit that home stretch. I like the way those are positioned.
I don't know why you wouldn't like 2 byes, especially if you had just that early bye. That probably wouldn't look great. Now you really space it out well. And I want to go back up to Central Florida, which we didn't get to from that first chunk, but I think this is going to be a huge test. First of all, we know how Colorado teams in general tend to play in Florida in September. This could be different. There's a lot of Florida kids on the roster, recruiting-wise, everything. It's kind of Deion's bread and butter that down there, right, at UCF. So I think that's going to be a really interesting game. CU's first game since 2008, I think, down in Florida. And then, of course, that's another team has been to, I think, 8 bowl games. That's going to be a tough matchup, too. So kicks off the slate, but I really like that one. And then I like the 2 byes.
Think they're going to stay at Disney World?
Happiest place on earth.
Happiest place on earth. Take a few roller coaster rides, you know. That second part of the schedule that they showed, you have Kansas State, Arizona, and Cincinnati between the 2 bye weeks. I think it's interesting because Kansas State, an old Big 8 foe. Arizona, a Pac-12 foe. Cincinnati, a brand new foe, and that's kind of how this whole conference is set up. You have old Big 8 teams, you have a few old Big 12 teams, you have teams from the Pac-12, and you also have teams that you've never been in a conference with before. So I don't know if it's nostalgic going back to the Big 12, but it's a little bit of everything. It's old, it's new, it's recent. It's a little bit of everything.
Yeah. Well, let's look at the latter part of the schedule because there will be some nostalgia there at Texas Tech, Utah, at Kansas, and then ending the season against an old Big 8 foe in Oklahoma State. I think this is going to be a really, really tough end to the season.
I agree. Texas Tech nearly beat Oregon last year in Lubbock. They bring back Taj Brooks, who was one of the top 3 or 4 rushers in the entire nation. Kansas is a whole lot better than they've been recently. They finished 23rd last year. Utah gets their quarterback Cam Rising back. You always know what Utah brings with Kyle Whittingham. That's always going to be a tough game. And Mike Gundy in Oklahoma State, they're always good. He gets the most out of what he has. That's a brutal 4-game stretch to finish the season.
And just a funny kind of cherry on top, but Kansas right now, they're redoing the stadium, so that game is going to be played at Arrowhead. So potentially you could have Colorado teams either getting swept or sweeping at Arrowhead, but an interesting little nugget there as well. And look, November at Arrowhead, well, that could be some – the Buffs didn't really have many cold weather games, right? No. That could be one of the interesting ones throughout the year. They've lucked out with weather, but I like it. And you had mentioned this, Eric, about Oklahoma State ending with an old Big 12 rival.
Yeah.
That's kind of a fun little thing. But it's tough. You look at this, it's a tough stretch. And it's going to be even more than last year target on their backs.
Yeah.
I will say this, when we look at the schedule and we kind of project out, like, who are they going to beat, who are they not going to beat, I think the one thing we have to consider is we have no idea what Colorado's going to be like next year, right? With all the new players they're going to bring in, once again, a lot of guys from the transfer portal. It's going to be a brand new offensive line. It's going to be a brand new defensive line. This team, basing your opinions based on last year, doesn't work because it's going to be almost an entirely new team with the exception of Travis Hunter and Deion Sanders and a couple other guys, Shiloh and Trevor Woods. But it's going to be a relatively new team. I think Colorado is going to be better. The question is how much better, right?
Exactly.
But they are going to be better.
And the good news is there's going to be a lot to talk about. And, of course, you guys are going to do a great job covering it all as the season kicks off against North Dakota State on August 31st.